Hello everyone, my name is Sara Pion. I am the head of marketing strategy at a company called Dandy. And what that means is I am tasked with optimizing our web experience in the form of conversion rate optimization, campaign support, and technical website structure. So I am here today to talk to you all about the conversion rate optimization maturity model. So we're all marketers here. I'm sure every marketer has gotten a message similar to this from their CEO. We should do some convoluted marketing initiative that's not nearly as simple as they think it is, and also kind of a bad idea. And you're just sitting there like, well, you don't know how to nicely tell your CEO to just let you do your job. So you either end up spending a lot of time working on an initiative that you don't believe in, or you have to figure out a way to tell your CEO no, which is very brave. Well, let me introduce you to another option. Conversion rate optimization, or CRO, as I'm going to call it for the rest of the presentation, gives you the tools to look your CEO in the eye or text your CEO back and say, great idea, let's test it. Not only that, which is a superpower in and of itself, let's be real, but website testing and conversion rate optimization is beginning to pick up a lot more speed in the conversations happening in the marketing world as a whole. What used to be reserved for teams the size of Netflix and Google is now being utilized within smaller organizations, which is really exciting. We all get to tap into the testing power that Netflix and Google have kind of gatekeeped. And it's for a good reason. CRO is a great way to get more out of your website visitors without having to increase the amount of traffic coming to your website. So it's a great way to get more from your budget, more from your existing initiatives, just more insight. Not only that, but CRO gives you the power to essentially sit down with more visitors to get a better understanding of what they like about your website, what they don't like about your website, what they wish they had more of, without actually having to sit down with thousands upon thousands of visitors in person. CRO is one of the only tools that lets you answer very specific user experience questions that can impact every other revenue generating arm of your business. Questions like, do our customers prefer seeing images of humans or the product? Or what format of a page works best for different personas coming to our website? How do different verticals interact with our website? Or what offers are most appealing to different audiences? For example, a returning visitor versus someone who just registered and attended a webinar. What offer is most appealing to two very different kinds of visitors that are all in one place, your website? But getting started with CRO can feel really daunting. Those questions are all really important to running a really successful marketing business, and you want to get the answers to them quickly. But that can also overwhelm you with all the possibilities of tests that you can start to run. So then breaking down the conversion rate optimization maturity model so that you can create a web testing roadmap so you don't feel like you have to get started doing everything immediately. Before I jump into the maturity model again, let's start with tips and tricks on how to actually get started with conversion rate optimization. What questions should you have answers to before you run your first test? First thing first, what are your goals? How are you going to measure the success of the CRO motion within your organization? And just like this entire presentation, it is an iterative motion. You don't have to start with influencing the customer journey right off the bat. Eventually, you'll want to influence a metric like meetings booked or even full funnel conversion. But to start, try to influence on-site behavior like page views per session or time on site or bounce rate, etc. Then when it comes to what pages should you run tests on, a good rule of thumb is to look at pages that get over 1,000 sessions per month. Obviously, this isn't set in stone, like don't tattoo that on your body and like never forget it, but it's a great way to make sure that your pages that you're driving traffic to or that you're running experiments on have enough traffic to give you answers in a timely manner. You don't want to be waiting months because the traffic on that page is lower than traffic on other pages that you really want to test something. If you're feeling stuck, take your highest traffic page or the page that drives the most conversions on the site and prioritize those first. And remember that 80% of your conversions are going to come from 20% of your pages. So not every single page on your website needs to have a test running on it. It probably won't, and that's fine. That's good. That's okay. And lastly, who should you collaborate with? Conversion optimization, CRO, is not something that should and can happen in a bubble. It is so collaborative. And as someone who's run CRO at a few different companies, I'll be the first to tell you I am not a designer. I should not and cannot create the designs that we should test on the website. So I love partnering with my counterparts in marketing in the design organization to have them craft up different variations for me, create those mock-ups so that they are to our brand standards and actually look visually appealing. Not only that, but product designers have a really interesting and useful insight into the user experience of your product, and they can help you tell the product story on different kinds of pages. They're a really great insight to give you a little bit more context into pairing the on-site experience with the in-app experience so that if you do have people who convert on your variation, they don't have any surprises when they get in-app and they start to poke around and see the similarities on-site versus in-app. Not only that, but product marketing can help you with positioning, making sure that you're telling the right kind of story, you're using the right kind of verbiage, you're using the right value propositions, and you're targeting the right personas. And product management also just does a great job at telling the story. So if you feel like you need a little bit more umph in your storytelling on your variations, these are all people that you can, should, and I would definitely recommend collaborating with. And lastly, oh, no, not lastly, I'm sorry, there's one more slide after this, but if you were to start structuring tests, how would you go about documenting that so that you're not just running things on the website, people come into the marketing channel on Slack and they're like, what the heck am I seeing on the website? Why is it like this? What are you doing? I usually like to create a campaign brief or a project plan or a one-pager, however your marketing team likes to structure campaigns, and tweak the format a little bit to cover these three main pieces of your test: your hypothesis, the background information that powers that hypothesis, and your forecasted lift. This is a great, basically, executive summary that you can show to your boss or your boss's boss to tell them what you're testing, why you're testing it, and what results they can expect in a very simplified manner. Then that page can act as a living document for your experiment. You can put more specifics in terms of the copy that you're testing or the mock-ups of all the variations that you'll run. But your test should always include these three things so that you're marching in the right direction and can show leadership why you're testing. So the first thing you have is a hypothesis. So when blank, they should blank, so they can blank, which will lead to blank. So if we're running an experiment based on page experience or on-site experience, when a user comes to our site, they should understand the different product lines that we offer so they can self-select what they're most interested in, which will lead to more page views per session, for example. That's how you would want to structure your hypothesis, and then the background information should power that hypothesis. What research did you do that led you to that statement? What's working really well right now on your website that you want to double down on? Or what's kind of missing from your website that you want to fix and you think that this experiment will fix that missing piece? And then your forecasted lift. So when you're just starting out, it's hard to know exactly what this forecasted lift is going to be. You can start with an educated guess. But as you start to mature and start to run more tests within the same realm, you'll start to have historical data that you can use to forecast your lift, just like you would any other demand gen channel on a quarter-over-quarter basis or experiment-by-experiment basis. Okay, last thing, I swear, before we hop into the maturity model. How should you be measuring the success of your experiments? So I like to use 95 to 99% statistical significance. So before I dive into what that actually means, how you calculate that, if you Google A/B test calculator, I think the first one that pops up is abtestcalc.com. I love that one, would recommend. You can understand, is the lift that you're seeing from your variation statistically significant enough to say, we did this. If you use a more in-depth and specific tool for website testing, usually they have some sort of stat sig built into the reporting of that tool. So essentially what statistical significance means is we're 95 to 99% confident that the lift in conversions we are seeing is due to our experiment and not another external factor that randomly could be affecting conversions on this specific page across our site, etc. That way you can point to your experiment and say, I know at a 95 to 97% confidence that we did that I did that we influenced that. And that's really powerful and a great way to make sure that you are showing the value of the test that you're running. Okay, let's actually get into it now. Let's dive into the conversion rate optimization maturity model. So, like most maturity models, there are 5 levels, and I'm going to go through them one by one so we can kind of go through the types of experiments that are run at each level and like the mentality of your organization at each level. So, starting with level 1, testing in an ad hoc manner. So, generally, you're not building a project plan. Once you reach statistical significance, you're not making a change to your base site or the rest of your marketing initiatives because of those learnings. And you're using baseline tooling, something like a Google Optimize that's free to use, and you're just kind of messing around in there and seeing how it works. There's nothing at all wrong with level 1. It's a great way to get started and just to familiarize yourself with how flexible you can and cannot be with a website testing tool. And it also does drive some sort of lift. It's just hard to tell what exactly it is because you're not doing it in a focused way. When I was running the conversion optimization at Drift, we started here where I was just whipping off variation requests to our web dev team, and they were like, Sarah, what the heck are you doing? How are any of these related? Like, why are you running these tests? And I was like, great question. I don't know. So I took a step back, I started writing project plans, I started doing research into why we wanted to run a certain experiment, and that really helped with telling my team what I was doing, and also giving the context to our web dev team so that they could understand why we were doing what we were doing. Once you get to that level, you're ready for level 2, which is setting up an experimentation framework within a campaign structure. So what that means is there's a specific landing page or a few different landing pages that are within the context of one specific campaign that your marketing team is driving traffic to. And those kinds of experiments can be split up into 2 different buckets: UX and UI improvements to those pages and relevancy experiments. So when you're thinking about, okay, we want to start doing campaign-specific testing, which way should we go? Because there are many experiments we can run within UX and UI, and there are many experiments we can run within relevancy. What is most applicable to our organization? So that's why each of the levels are now split up into 2 sort of like roads that you could take. That if you take one road, it doesn't mean you can't take another. It's just how should you prioritize your work. So if we look at UX and UI improvements, you can test things like content length. Do people prefer longer form or shorter form pages within the context of that campaign? Do you have a mobile experience versus a desktop experience? Like a lot of paid social is coming to this page, but there isn't a mobile optimized experiment. Can we run one? Can we see if that boosts conversion rates? What about additional CTAs? Is there one CTA on the page that says, let's talk, but it's a webinar landing page? That doesn't make a ton of sense. So what if that CTA was register now? What if there was a CTA on the hero that loaded the page to the form so it made a lot more sense? You were really connecting the points of conversion on that page so that people knew I should register for this webinar. Could you change and test the CTA colors? Are you only using your primary color as a CTA? What about your secondary and tertiary colors within your brand guidelines? What does your audience actually prefer versus what does your brand team prefer? And similar with typography, generally you'll have a primary and secondary font. What if you tested those interchangeably to see if one had more of effect versus the other? But then if you go to relevancy experiments, you could do things like headline variations. Are the headlines on those pages synonymous with the email subject lines that you're sending to that audience, or the ad headlines that they're seeing on Facebook or LinkedIn? Can you make sure that that's continuous? What about hero image variations? If you're talking about a product in your email or in your ad and they come to a page and they see a human but not a product, is that super relevant? Does that post-click experience make sense? If not, what if there's a human with a product? What if there's just the product? How can we make sure that those images make sense within the context of your campaign? Same thing with CTA text variation. So you've added CTAs to your page. Now should they say register now, save your seat, another one? Those variations can drive different senses of urgency on that page. Same thing with social proof. Should it be logos versus testimonials versus tweets versus something totally different? What makes sense for this campaign? And similar to copy, Does your landing page copy match the messaging in your email and in your app? All those, level 2, there's so much you can do. And there's no sense of urgency for you to try and go from level 2 to level 3. You're still here and running tests. Moving on to level 3, setting up an experiment to answer a question around conversions across the full site. Now we're talking whole website, not just campaign-specific landing pages. So again, there are 2 avenues you can take. The overall conversion experience, what is it like to convert on your site, or adding additional points of conversion so it makes sense what we want you to do when you're on our website. So conversion experiences can be things like the form experience. Should you shorten the form so that you only see a certain amount of fields, and then it lengthens so that people are more apt to start filling out that form and then they feel like they can just finish it because it's not that big of a deal. What about the nav bar experience? Usually you have your primary and secondary CTA within your nav bar. When you scroll, is it sticky? Does it follow you as you scroll down the page? If not, can it be? And if it is sticky, what if it changes colors when you scroll? So it starts as one color, and then as you scroll, it changes color to your secondary brand color, and it calls more attention to that nav experience. Or what about the copy on your form fields? Instead of saying full name, should it say, what should we call you? Instead of saying email address, should it say business email address? There's so much that can happen within the experience of converting across your full site. Or you can create more ways for people to convert on your website. So can you add inline CTAs if you are on a product page talking about specific features and there is another page around that specific feature? Can you add a CTA under that component that drives them to another page? Or can you add a component after your hero image that has a rotating content offer? What should that content offer be? Test it. What about adding pop-ups to your website if you're trying to drive an increase in blog subscribers? Should you run a pop-up, and what should that pop-up say, and how should you position the blog subscription on your website? There's so much that you can do when you add additional points of conversion to your website. Moving on to level 4, setting up experiments to answer questions about the customer journey. So this is when things start to get a little bit more complicated and you start to get more integration with different data sources. So for your page experience, after your hero image or after your hero component, what's the next best element on the page? Is it a content offer? Is it social proof? Is it product information? Can you test like where those components fall on your page so that it makes the most sense on that specific page? If you are lucky enough to have a page that has really high traffic but really low value, you can try something that I've done that's called the Simple Ask homepage. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear, so feel free to bleep that out. But essentially that's when you cut all of the content below the fold and you just start with your hero. You optimize that hero and then you start to add elements under that hero to see how you can maintain that conversion rate of just the hero with different components on your site. Not everyone can do that, so playing around with shifting the overall layout of your page can be a really fun test to run. Or you can go with the best offer sort of experience, which is when you'll sort of add more data infrastructure to your testing tool. So what should the return visitor CTA be? On the second visit to your site, what's the best way to position a demo versus on the first visit to your site? You kind of go back to that same mindset of level 2, where you're thinking about the best experience for a certain persona within their customer journey context. It's just happening at scale across your whole site. If a person in your enterprise segment visits the website, what should the headline be versus someone in your mid-market business unit will see when they come to the same page? Same with if a user just attended your most recent webinar, what should their experience on the website look like, as opposed to someone who's on their first visit to the website coming in from a product-specific ad and they landed on the same page? How can that page be tailored to different audiences? And similar to when you were choosing the kinds of pages you wanted to test, similarly, you should choose the audiences that you create different experiences for based on volume. Do you have a ton of webinar registrants that come to your site over and over again, but they haven't yet converted on a demo? What should their website experience look like? And that's when you start to create your website and make your website more of like a nurture tool versus just your standalone storefront, essentially digital storefront online. Instead, your website tailors and grows with your business. And the last level, level 5 of conversion rate optimization is level 5 is influencing the customer journey on your website, using your site as its own nurture sequence based on visible data. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I have not yet seen or experienced a company that has reached this level 5, but it's a really great goal to shoot for, of looking and viewing and seeing your website as it's a standalone channel that has the opportunity to move leads and users and customers through a journey tailored specifically to them. When you keep going to a Starbucks over and over again, they don't treat you like a new visitor every single time you get there. Your site should be the same. The final tips, just as we kind of close out this session, if you are testing a page, you should try and not test more than 3 elements on a page. So not having headline variations, hero image, and CTA, nothing more than that, kind of testing at one time, just so that you have the right amount of traffic allocation being delivered to your experiences at once. In that same vein, A/B testing versus multivariate testing. A/B testing is great if you don't have a ton of traffic. Multivariate testing does require more traffic. I prefer dynamic traffic allocation. So if a variation is performing well, does my tool allocate more traffic to it so I get responses and I get answers to my questions faster? And how do you report? How should you see success? Setting up goals in Google Analytics so you see the traffic allocation to your variations and the goals that are being performed when people view those variations. And if you're starting to get a little bit more robust, using different form IDs for different experiments so that you can say, hey, if someone converted on this form, they saw this on the website, tailor your sales messaging to this. So that is all for me. Thank you so much for listening. If you ever want to nerd out about conversion rate optimization or brainstorm your next test, you can find me on Twitter at Sara_Pion or LinkedIn. I'm just Sara Pion. Thank you so much to Metadata for having me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of Demand 2022.